Hi everybody. This is a tutorial to get you started on the midterm mapping project and just how to make maps using ArcGIS and story maps. Here in part one, we're going to go through the steps to build your map using ArcGIS, so your geographical map. In part two, we're going to talk about how to bring that map into the Story Maps portal and connect it up with images and your narrative panels. Before I do that, on my screen right now, you should see just a demo of one of the story maps that we are going to be looking at a little bit later in class. This is from Module 5, focusing on the American Revolution, and this is actually a little bit older version of it. But this should give you an example of what story maps should look like. You also saw an example of this in the Module 1 Agincourt story map. So you can see you've got some text, you've got some images here, and then you have some maps. And actually the one that you're seeing here in this particular slide has an overlay on it. So this is why it doesn't look exactly like a kind of a topographical map. It's because I've set it to include an overlay. Um, but you can see that as you scroll through the presentation, the map is going to zoom around. You may see some kind of drawings on here showing troop movements, things like that. And so what we're going to do in this little tutorial is kind of walk through how do we build something like that. Okay, so I've switched over to the ArcGIS online website, which is what we're going to be using to build our maps. I recommend that you decide on most of your locations and start thinking about what you want to talk about in your narrative panels before you actually start building the geographic map. You don't have to have everything worked out, but it helps to have a plan before you really get into this. Um, you're going to want to build your geographic map in ArcGIS first. Once you've done that, you'll then bring that geographic map into the story map template and reuse it throughout the story map, highlighting the different locations that you're talking about in your text. So let's start here by talking a bit about the geographical map interface in ArcGIS. So this is what it's going to look like after you log in. You're just going to go to Map, and this is going to pull up the mapping window. So this is the map viewer where you're going to build the actual geographic map. And we've got some choices to make here right from the beginning. So what do we want our base map to look like? Just the basic screen that we're going to see when we look at this map. The way we do that is if we come over here to where these three dots are, click on that, we'll choose base map. And you can see that the current one I have here is just a basic topographic map, but there's a lot of different options I could go with. Um, Sometimes this is going to depend on the type of story you're telling. Um, whether you want to have a lot of streets or navigation or roads, or whether you just want, basic light gray canvas. For our purposes, I think I'm going to use one called, where is it? The Modern Antique Map. So you can kind of see the difference here. It's just a stylistic choice. At this point, I would say go ahead and save. One thing to be aware of with ArcGIS is that it does not save as you go. So you want to make sure that you save your work frequently as you go along. So I'm just going to start by saving this project. I'm going to save it as just a demo map for the tutorial. I recommend that you add a little summary here of what this map is about at some point, but you don't have to do it right now. Okay, so we've saved our map. We're ready to start bringing locations into the map. Now, for the midterm project, the way we're going to do this is by using a spreadsheet. You can create a spreadsheet using Excel if you have it on your computer. You can also use Google Sheets if you don't have Excel. The spreadsheet is basically going to tell the ArcGIS program where to place all your location points and to associate any other information that you've included in that spreadsheet with those points. I've provided you with a separate handout on how to create the spreadsheet, but I'll actually walk you through it here so that you can see how this works. So let me share a different screen. Okay. Now in the share window, you should see a demo spreadsheet that I've already set up. And you can see some of the basic information that's in this. Um, at a minimum, in your spreadsheet, you need to have the name of the location that you're mapping, and then the longitude and latitude coordinates for that location. Now you can include some other information in here too. If you want to include pop-ups in your map, you might include description, you might include images, um, categories, which we'll talk about here in a second. But at a minimum, you need to have the name and then the longitude and latitude coordinates. And one thing I want to point out here, if you look at these numbers, you'll see that in the longitude category here, all these numbers have a minus sign in front of them. That's important. If the coordinate that you use has a minus sign, then it needs to actually be input into the spreadsheet as a minus sign, because otherwise it's going to skew where that location displays. Okay, well, how do you find latitude and longitude coordinates? Let me share my screen, change my screen again. I'm going to go back to the ArcGIS template here for a second. And let's just scroll in. Let's say that we want to, actually, I'm going to scroll way, way in. Let's say that we want to find the coordinates for Langdale Hall. So I've scrolled in, we see that this is Peachtree Street right here. We've got Decatur Street crossing, and this building right here is Langdale. To get the coordinates for that, I'm going to come over here to the right side to this little wrench icon that says Map Tools. I'll click on that, and I want to choose the location option. When I do that, it's going to give me this little pop-up window here, and as I roll my cursor around in the pop-up, you see the coordinates are moving. This is showing me the longitude and the latitude. So if I hover my little cursor here right over Langdale, you can see that those numbers there are the coordinates. Now, unfortunately, it's difficult to get it to stay there. So you probably would have to just write this down and copy it in instead of copying and pasting. But that's how you're going to get those locations. Okay, so you're going to do that for all of the locations that you want to map. Just go through, kind of zoom in onto the map and find where it is, copy that coordinate information, and then if you want to make this go away, you can just go back to Map Tools and click Location again, and that'll make it disappear, so it's not cluttering up your screen. Okay, so let me go back to the spreadsheet here just for a second. So now you see in the spreadsheet, we've got all this information. So we've got the name of these locations, we've got the coordinates, the longitude and latitude. At minimum, that's what we need to have. So now we're ready to actually add this into the spreadsheet. It's into the ArcGIS program itself. Let's see, and I'm going to pause this just for a moment because I need to close that spreadsheet in order to do this. Okay, so we've got all the information that we want added to the spreadsheet. We're ready to bring that into ArcGIS. Now, one thing you want to be sure about before you actually do this is that when you save that spreadsheet file, you don't want to just save it as an Excel file. You want to save it as a .csv file. This is a very particular type of spreadsheet file that ArcGIS can read. If it's just saved as a regular Excel file, ArcGIS can't read it. So just make sure that when you go in to save the spreadsheet file, you just do save as, and then find that .csv file format. So once we've saved it, we're going to go over here on to the left where it says Add. We're going to click on Add, and we want to do Add Layer from File. And now we're just going to go and find that file that we want. In this case, it's the spreadsheet demo file. It's going to click you through some options here, and you can change there's reasons why you would want to change these at times, but I think for our purposes, you probably just leave this alone. And you'll eventually get to a screen that says Create and Add to Map. So we'll do that. And now if you've entered the information into your spreadsheet and you've added it into ArcGIS correctly, you should see all of your location points pop up on the map. So this is how we can get all of that information from the spreadsheet into the mapping program. One thing to be aware of, if you make changes to your spreadsheet file after you've added it to the map, you may need to delete it from the map and then re-add it just to make sure any of that updated information displays. So basically, if you have someone updating the spreadsheet and someone else in your group working on the map, you just need to communicate that amongst your group to make sure that you have the most recent and the correct version of the spreadsheet actually included here in the map so that you have all the information that you want. Okay, well, what we see here on the map, these are just a bunch of gray dots. And that's a little bit boring. Maybe I want my location points to display in color. Maybe I don't just want dots. Maybe I want a different color. Maybe I want a different symbol. We can change that stuff. Over here on the right, we've got this little box that says Styles. So if I click on that, it's going to give me some options. If I just want to change the colors and so forth, I can come down here to number 2, pick a style, and go to Style Options. And this is going to give me some choices. So if I click here on Symbol Style, instead of it being just a basic point, I can have some different shapes. There's some symbols. So if you want to have, airplanes or something like that, that might be relevant for your project, probably not for this project, but maybe a different one. There's a lot of different things you can change here. So let's say I want to make them squares instead. And let's say I want to change the color. I've got some options here where I can change colors across the entire spectrum. So let's say here, I'm just going to make them blue. And you see they've all changed color here on my map. I actually don't like blue. It's a little too, can't see it real well. So we'll switch to red. Another thing you can do in terms of playing with the look of it, if you come down here to the effects option, this just gives you some different effects that you can change. So if you want a drop shadow on your points, you see how it's doing that. You can turn that on and off. If you want to change the brightness, the contrast, saturation. One thing that's kind of neat is the sepia option. So if you're trying to make it look kind of old-timey, you can use this as a way of kind of changing the look. But these are just some things that you can play around with if you want to. And I actually don't want that, so I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so I've changed the color of my location points, but they're all still identical to each other. Maybe I want to use color and symbols in my map to group different kinds of locations. This can be a way to add more information to your map with color and symbols. This takes a few more steps, but it's still actually very easy to do. We can set this information up in our spreadsheet and then just tell ArcGIS to turn it on using the attributes option. So if I go back to my spreadsheet here for a second, let me share that. And you can see what I'm talking about. This is why we would use the category column. So let's say that for this particular project, again, this is an American Revolution project, I've got a bunch of forts that were British positions. I've got some battles that were British victories. I've got some battles that were American victories. Maybe I want to be able to display all of that on the map so that the viewer can easily see that without me having to explain all of it using words. That's how I'm using the category. I've given each of these different types of things a label. So British Post, British Victory, American Post, American Victory. Um, you'll notice that each of these is identical. So each label is exactly the same. Your capitalization, your spacing, all that must match identically because if I have, British Post in here, capital B, capital P, and then I also have it in here, lowercase b, lowercase p, the program thinks that these are two different things, it's going to give me different dots for that in the map. So just make sure that if you're using these labels to kind of categorize your information, that they are identical to each other. Each of your British posts looks exactly alike. Okay, so we've used the spreadsheet to create these different categories and labels. Now let's tell ArcGIS how to turn them on. So if we come on over here on the right back to the styles little menu, this time, actually, I'm going to turn off the color. So we'll just, well, maybe we won't. Okay. We'll go up here to choose attributes, and we're going to choose field. What we're basically doing here is telling ArcGIS to display in the map the information that's in that selected field. So you'll see each of these fields is a column in our spreadsheet. We've got a column for name, category, in this case, images, sources, whatever columns you want to have can potentially be a field here. So instead of choosing the name field, this time we're going to choose category and add that. And now you'll see in the map, we've got our different labels showing up in our legend. And the dots on the map are colored to reflect that. So we've got all the British posts are marked in red, British victories are marked in blue, American victories, not a whole lot of them. There's a purple one. American posts, again, not a lot of them, but you've got a green one. So you can see how using that category column is a way that you can add more information and kind of visual interest to your map. Now there's also ways that you can edit these colors. So if I go, let me back out of this just for a second. Now I'm back in the style. So we use the attributes section here to do this. Maybe I want to change the colors. Maybe I don't like it being red or blue. I want to do something different. If I come here to style, I'll click on style options. And it's going to give me different choices for each one of these categories. So if I don't like the red dot for British Post, I can click on that. And it's going to give me a lot of different options here of basic shapes. If I want it to be squares, I can make it squares, etc. So when I change it for this one dot, it's going to change it for all of these other British posts. So again, let's say I want to make these squares. And you can see on the map, all the British ones have been changed to red squares. So this is just one way that you can add a little bit more information to your map without having to have a whole lot of text. This is just something visual that the viewer can see and kind of help them make sense of what it is that they're looking at. Um, So for your purposes, maybe some of the locations you're talking about were Union victories or Confederate victories or railroads versus hospitals, things like that. This is just a way that you can kind of categorize that information and display it visually. Another way you can add some visual interest to your map, and this is totally optional, but you can include pop-ups. So let's go here and click on one of these particular points. Let's click on this purple one. When I click on that particular dot, it's showing me this pop-up for this particular location. So I've got the name, the Battle of Kings Mountain. It was an American victory. In this case, I did include an image URL. So if I click on that, it will show me the image. I'm not sure that that's going to display for you guys. So I'm going to get out of that. It's also got the latitude and the longitude points here. So this is something that, if you want to add more information, you can. You could add a column in your spreadsheet with description and actually have some text in there that could then display in your pop-up. Um, so there's a lot of additional information that you can put in here if you want to. The only thing you can't do is customize pop-ups for individual points. If you want to add pop-ups, just come over here again on the right to the menu option that says pop-ups. Click on that. Um, we have to enable them. You obviously have to turn them on. Um, and then you have some options here as to which fields you actually want to have show up. So if you want to have, again, these are all the columns that are in our spreadsheet. You probably do want to have the name, probably do want to have the category. If you've added images, a link to an image, you might want to have that. You might not want the latitude and longitude on here because that's kind of clutter. It's kind of filling up the pop-up with things that aren't necessarily information the viewer wants to see. Um, so you have options here of things that you can turn on and turn off. The only thing about this is that if you turn them on and off, you turn them on and off for all of your pop-ups. So you can't choose, okay, I want a description for this particular point, but not for that one. If you're going to turn them on and off, it's for all of your points or none of your points. So you've got a lot of potential options here, but I encourage you to think about what you want the end display of your project to look like. If you put too much information in the pop-up box, maybe you've got a really long description there. One, that can make the project look cluttered. You also have to remember that a viewer has to deliberately click on those map points in order to see your pop-ups at all. And a lot of people don't. So if you have all of that information in your pop-ups, some stuff you really want your viewers to get might be missed. Maybe that's information or detail that would actually be better to put into the narrative itself. So if you're going to use pop-ups, just make some choices and think critically about how they're actually going to contribute to the overall project. And I do want to stress here, you don't have to use pop-ups if you don't want to. Again, it all depends on your overall vision for the project. Some projects may lend themselves well to using pop-ups, others don't. It could be a nice add-on, but it really shouldn't make or break the map. Okay, let me close some of this out. I'm going to pause while I do that. Okay, another option you can use on your map is to show troop movements or arrows or drawing lines or boxes or other things that might add visual interest and kind of explain different aspects of your story to the viewer. And the way that you can do this is by using the sketch layers option. And I'll just show you an example of what this looks like. So what I've pulled up here is actually one of the maps that appears in that American Revolution story map. This is focusing on the Battle of Cowpens. Um, so if I go over here to layers, this shows you all the different sketch layers that are actually in this map. And I've used them to show different aspects of the battle. So right now they're all turned off. But if I turn them on, you can see what I'm talking about. So Here, this is a layer that shows the preliminary positions in this battle. We can see where the British were, we can see the different American positions. I've got another layer that shows the next step in the battle. So here the British move up, the American skirmishers fire their shots, and then they pull back. So you can use these different sketch layers to kind of illustrate different steps in battles or to show troop movements or other things like that if you want to. This does get a little bit more complicated. Um, and one thing that you do want to be aware of, and I'll just show you this while I've got this open rather than come back to it. Um, you want to think about what information do you want in each individual layer. Layers are your friend. If you try to show too much information at once, it's going to get really cluttered. That's why you break it up. So let's say that I turn on all of these. Now you can see the second part of the battle, the third part of the battle, the fourth part. You see all the clutter on here. This doesn't make sense to the viewer. So this is why you would use different layers to show different pieces at a time. And you can turn them on and off as you need to. Um, if you decide to do this, you would want to make sure that each layer has a pretty clear name for what it is. So in this case, Battle Part 1. Skirmishers are withdrawing, British are advancing. That's so that when I go back to this map and I'm building it out, I know which ones I want to turn on and which ones I want to turn off in this particular display. So this is really to kind of help it make sense to you as you're putting this together. This is not something that the viewer is actually going to see. So again, if you use this kind of sketch layers option, just think about what do you want to have in each layer. And as you're adding information, you want to make sure you're in the right layer. So let me close this out and I'll go back into the actual map builder screen and I'll show you how you do this. All right, so we're back in ArcGIS. We're back in this kind of map builder screen. I do have this one, if I click on layers, I have my spreadsheet demo. This is all my location points on it. Let's say that I want to add a sketch layer where I'm actually going to draw some arrows and maps and, sorry, arrows and boxes and other things. I'm going to click this little drop down box next to add. I'm in the layers screen. I'm going to click this box next to add. And I'm going to come down here to create sketch layer. And you can see this is going to give me a bunch of other little options over in this window. So I've zoomed into Atlanta. We're looking right at where Georgia State is. Um, let's say that I want to put a point on Langdale Hall. So I've got the vector point thing highlighted. I'm just going to come here and click in the map, and that's going to give me a point. If I want to change what that point looks like, maybe I don't want it to be, this kind of symbol. I can come over here to change symbols. And I've got a lot of different options here, actually more than I had in the other kind of symbol option, the styles option. I can put arrows, I can put buildings. You can see the different kinds of options I have here. I can put trees. So there's a lot of different neat little stuff here you can play with. Let's say I want to put a porcupine right here on Langdale Hall instead of that vector point. I can do that. So that's actually changed my symbol here. Maybe I want to draw a box around Langdale Hall or a circle or something. Instead of using this point option, I'm going to come down here to rectangle. And I will just draw a rectangle, just like that. Now, maybe I don't have it in quite the right place. I'll need my cursor to actually select it, and then I should be able to just move it around. So you've got some options here of different things you can play with. If you want that box to be a particular color, you can change the colors. You can change the transparency, all these kinds of different visual things. Maybe you want to draw a line, showing troops moving from one spot to another. I can do that. And then I would just double click to stop. Maybe I want to get rid of it. I'm just going to select it and then delete. So you've got some options here you can play around with if you want to. Again, this is all in one layer, so you want to think about what you're actually displaying and how that's going to display to the viewer. You may need to do this in multiple steps, multiple layers, and just make sure that you're actually having the right one turned on. So now I've got a second layer. I can turn this one off, turn it back on, and you can see how you can use that to display things. Um, One thing that I will point out here about these kinds of map notes, sketch notes, symbols, um, they don't really scale with the map. So this armadillo or whatever this is going to stay about the same size if I zoom in and out. So you can see how that might be a problem as I zoom further and further out. So you just want to think about how it's actually going to display and how you're going to have it zoomed in on the window that you actually put into your story map as you're building it. So again, just kind of thinking a couple steps ahead as you're putting this together. Okay, so I've closed out those sketch layers back in our main spreadsheet map showing all of our locations here. And maybe this is all I have time to work on today. I want to save it. Again, remember, save frequently. Maybe I want to close this out and come back to it later. So I'm just going to close this out. I will reopen an ArcGIS window. So let me do that real quick. So I'm back in the ArcGIS main window, the home screen. If I want to go back into what I've been working on, instead of going to map, I'm going to go over here to content. And this is going to pull up a list of all the things that I've been working on. So in this case, I was working on that demo map for the tutorial. I'm just going to click on that, open it in the map viewer. And now I'm back in the window where I can work on my map again. So that's how you close it out and reopen when you want to come back to it later. All right, well, let's say that we're completely done editing the geographical map. We're done with this part of it, and we're ready to actually bring it into ArcGIS, the story map program. Before we can actually bring this into the story map template, we need to share it with other people because right now we're the only ones who can see it. We have the login, so it's private. I'm the only one who can actually see this map. In order for anyone else on the web to be able to see this project, I need to share it with them. So I'm going to come over here to Share Map on the left. I'm going to go to Manage Sharing. And this is going to give me some options. Now, right now, I'm the owner. I'm the only one who can see it. I want to change that option to everyone and hit save. And these are just some screens that you can click through. So now this is shared publicly so that when I go to actually add it into the story maps template, anyone on the web is going to be able to see it when I make the story map public. So you need to make sure that you share this before you actually add it into the story map template. Otherwise, when you put the map on your story map, it's not actually going to display. If you just want to share this geographical map, let's say you just want to have a link to this, you can come over here to Share Map and do Copy Link to Map. And that's just going to give you a URL that you can cut and paste into a browser. That's not how we're going to add the geographical map to the story map template, and I will show you how to do that in part 2. But for now, we're actually finished building our geographical map. So the next step is going to be to move on to the story maps template. And that's where you're going to add your narrative panels, images, any other content that you want to have and actually build out the full project. That's actually going to be a lot easier than this geographic map portion, but I will talk about how we do that in part 2 of this tutorial.